There's a specific kind of exhaustion that nobody talks about. It's not the exhaustion of working too hard. It's the exhaustion of not knowing what you're working toward. You're not lazy. You've never been lazy. You've tried things. You've committed to things. You've rebuilt yourself more than once. And yet here you are, past 35, maybe past 40, still carrying that quiet, relentless feeling that you haven't found it yet, that the thing you're actually supposed to be doing is still out there, just slightly beyond where you are right now. Most people who feel this way spend years assuming something is wrong with them. The psychology says something completely different, and once you understand what's actually happening inside your brain at this stage of life, that feeling you've been carrying, the one that's felt like failure, is going to start looking like something else entirely. There is a concept in developmental psychology called the identity moratorium. It was first described by psychologist James Marcia in the 1960s, building on the foundational work of Erik Erikson. Marcia was trying to understand why some people seem to move through life with certainty and direction, while others, equally intelligent, equally capable, spent years in a state of searching, exploring, questioning, never quite settling into a fixed identity or a clear path. He called this the moratorium stage. And for decades it was studied almost exclusively in adolescence, because the assumption was that identity formation was something you did in your teens and early 20s, and then it was done. That assumption turned out to be wrong. What researchers began documenting in the late 1990s and into the 2000s was a phenomenon they hadn't anticipated. A growing number of adults, educated, thoughtful, often professionally successful on the surface, were experiencing extended identity moratoriums, not in adolescence, in their 30s, 40s, sometimes beyond. And the critical finding wasn't that these people were developmentally stunted. It was that they were developmentally different, in a way that the original model simply hadn't been built to account for. Here's what that means for you specifically. The standardized model of adult development was built on a particular assumption, that life unfolds in linear stages. You find yourself in your 20s, you build in your 30s, you consolidate in your 40s, you harvest in your 50s. Clean, sequential, predictable. The problem is that model was constructed by studying a specific kind of person, in a specific kind of era, facing a specific kind of world. A world where careers lasted 40 years, where identity was largely assigned by geography, family, religion, profession, where the number of paths available to you was narrow enough that choosing didn't require years of excavation. You did not grow up in that world. You grew up in a world of radical optionality, hundreds of possible careers, multiple possible selves, constant access to information about every path you didn't take, a culture that simultaneously told you that you could be anything and then judged you for not having figured it out already. Psychologists have a name for what happens to the brain under these conditions. They call it the paradox of choice. Barry Schwartz documented it in a landmark 2004 study. When the number of available options exceeds a certain threshold, the human brain doesn't become more decisive. It becomes paralyzed, not because you're weak, not because you lack direction, but because your brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do, running a cost-benefit analysis across an impossible number of variables, searching for the optimal choice, refusing to commit until the analysis feels complete. And in a world with infinite options, the analysis never feels complete. So you keep searching, not because you're lost, because your brain is working correctly in an environment it was never evolutionarily designed for. That distinction matters more than most people realize, because the story you've been telling yourself about your searching, that it means something is broken, that you should have figured this out by now, that other people your age have it together and you don't. That story isn't just inaccurate. It's actively damaging the part of your brain you need most right now. Here's what the neuroscience shows. When you operate under chronic self-judgment, when you spend years believing you're behind, that your searching is shameful, that every year without clarity is a year wasted, your brain spends an enormous amount of metabolic energy on what researchers call self-threat processing. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for creative thinking, long-term planning, pattern recognition, and insight, the exact capacities you need to actually find your path, goes partially offline. Not completely, but enough. Enough that the very act of judging yourself for not having found clarity neurologically reduces your ability to find it. You are searching for the door in a room where your own anxiety keeps dimming the lights. Dr. Ethan Kross at the University of Michigan has spent years studying how self-talk affects cognitive performance. His research shows that people who engage in harsh internal self-criticism during periods of uncertainty don't just feel worse. They objectively perform worse on tasks requiring insight and creative connection, the exact tasks that lead people to discover what they're meant to do. The self-judgment isn't just painful, it's the primary obstacle. And this is where the research takes a turn that most people aren't prepared for, because it turns out that the people who find their path after 35, and the data shows clearly that millions of people do, don't find it by trying harder. They don't find it by being more disciplined or more focused or more strategic. They find it when they stop doing one specific thing, and most of them couldn't have stopped doing it a decade earlier. Not because they weren't capable, because the neuroscience of the adult brain at 35, 40, and beyond creates a specific window, a biological readiness, that simply doesn't exist at 22. Here's what that window is. Neuroscientist Daniel Levitin, in his research on the aging creative brain, identified something remarkable. The brain in midlife undergoes a shift in how it integrates experience. In your 20s, your brain is essentially an acquisition machine. It's collecting data, storing experiences, building frameworks. It's fast, hungry, and constantly seeking novelty. But in your mid-30s and beyond, something structural begins to change. The brain starts prioritizing integration over acquisition. It begins connecting the experiences you already have in ways it couldn't, or wouldn't, before. It starts finding patterns across the different chapters of your life, linking the things you tried that didn't work to the skills you built without realizing it, connecting your apparent failures to capabilities that no one else in your field has, because no one else in your field took the same winding road you did. This is not consolation. This is documented neuroscience. The brain you have right now at 35, 40, 45 is literally more capable of the kind of synthesis required to find your path than the brain you had at 25. You weren't supposed to figure this out earlier. You didn't have the hardware for it yet. What looks like delay from the outside is integration from the inside, and integration, by definition, requires time. The people who feel most lost in their late 30s and 40s are often the people with the most complex, multi-dimensional inner architecture. They've lived more than one life. They've developed skills in more than one domain. They've cared about more than one thing. And the brain, faced with that much material to integrate, takes longer. Not because it's slow, because there's more to work with. Think about what it takes to write a great novel versus a simple memo. The memo is done in minutes. The novel takes years, not because the novelist is less capable, but because what they're building is more complex, more layered, more worth the time it demands. You are not a memo. You are something that takes longer to write. And here is what the research on late path discovery consistently shows. The finding that changes how people carry this. The people who find meaningful direction after 35 don't find something entirely new. They find the through line. They look back at every chapter, every job, every interest, everything they were told was a detour or a mistake or a distraction, and they see, for the first time clearly, that those chapters were connected, that there was a thread running through all of it, that their path wasn't absent, it was accumulating. They were never lost. They were building the map. The exhaustion you feel isn't the exhaustion of failure. It's the exhaustion of carrying something heavy for longer than you expected to carry it, without yet knowing what it's for. But the weight has been shaping you. Everything you've tried, everything that didn't work, every direction you explored and left, every version of yourself you outgrew. None of it was wasted. All of it is in you. All of it is yours. And the brain you have right now, older, more integrated, more capable of synthesis than it has ever been, is closer to making sense of all of it than it has ever been. You are not behind. You are exactly where someone with your depth, your history, your complexity is supposed to be. The only question worth asking now isn't what went wrong. It's this. What if everything that felt like a detour was actually the education? And what does someone with that education do next? Because the answer to that question, the research suggests, is closer than it has ever been.